Hi, this is Pratik Chogli. I'm here at the LSAC Forum in Boston, and I wanted to do a video today on diversity and what it means for you as a law school applicant. So one of the things that they gave us here at the LSAC event today is a pamphlet, which hopefully you can see in the video here, but it says on the cover, why diversity matters. And then, they sort of say in here, okay, LSAC actively supports initiatives that advance diversity in law school, the legal profession. And then here in the pamphlet, it's a short thing here, but they kind of describe why they care about diversity. So they say here, access to justice is essential for a democratic society, and diversity in the legal profession increases the likelihood of access for people from an increasingly diverse population. Law school diversity enables individuals from a wide range of backgrounds to add to their perspectives to the greater legal community. Diversity adds to a richer experience in the law school classroom for all students. And then they say here, LSAC's diversity initiatives reflect and embrace the vibrant and expanding diversity of our society. So, one of the point here, I thought that was actually a pretty sort of pithy and interesting sort of note about how law school admissions officers think about diversity. Now, as you've probably gathered by now, diversity is a very important agenda or priority for law school admissions officers, and I would even argue that it's become, in a sense, almost a civic religion. And what I mean by that is, even though issues around diversity are obviously debated and contentious in the legal community, there are also a lot of shared assumptions that top-tier law schools and top-tier law school admissions officers sort of have when it comes to diversity, and I think this pamphlet sort of summarizes them well. Basically, the idea is that diversity of different opinions will benefit both the law school experience and the law school environment and the legal profession. There's an assumption that there's sort of a social justice mechanism here, that if someone comes from a certain background, especially an underrepresented background, that there are benefits to including them in the process, et cetera, et cetera. So what does this mean for you as a law school applicant? And I have a couple thoughts on that. I think one is that it may not concern you at all. So, if you're from a demographic that's not underrepresented, and you have intellectual or career interests that don't really pertain to this diversity issue, then there's no point in even really thinking about it too much or mentioning it in your application or wading into that debate. If you're a white male from an upper class background and your primary interest is in some particular area of corporate law or a law in economics or whatever, right, just write about that. I mean, trying to wade into this diversity stuff is probably just going to create more problems for you than not. But there are other sort of considerations here if your background or your interests do intersect with this issue. I think one thing to think about is, do your intellectual and professional interests, are they somehow implicated in this diversity question? And if it is, you may want to think about sort of approaching that in your application with this diversity question in mind. So, for example, if you happen to be a critic of certain aspects of diversity, or if you have a unique perspective, that's something certainly worth mentioning, assuming that you do it kind of carefully and responsibly. Or, for example, if one of your extracurricular activities maybe had the effect of contributing to this goal of greater diversity and representation, in American society, that probably will be of interest to law school admissions officers. So you have to think about this strategically, because on the one hand, diversity is this interesting thing. On the other hand, you don't want to just sort of repeat and say the same things that every other applicant is saying, or that are not new or in any way sort of thought-provoking to an admissions officer, because that also will not do you favors. So think about that angle. The other issue is when it comes to your own background. And I guess I have sort of a controversial view here, but I'll get it out there, and you can ask me more questions about it if you want to. The reality is that in order to get the kind of class and representation that the law schools want, it's not necessarily diversity in and of itself that they're looking for, but it's really certain kinds of diversity. So if you're from a background, let's say a minority group, a socioeconomic group, or whatever, that tends to be underrepresented in law schools, that's obviously going to give you a leg up if you're a part of that background. On the other hand, if you're from a background that's overrepresented in a law school, that could be an upper class background, it could be coming from a family of lawyers, it could be being Asian or Jewish. You kind of have to tread carefully here, because the reality is, unless you really have something unique, interesting, etc. to offer, your identity probably, frankly, is going to be, at best a wash, but it may, frankly, hurt you. I mean, it may sort of put you in a certain category of people where you're competing with a relatively competitive segment of the applicant pool. Now, if you do have sort of something in your background that would further this, that would be of interest to diversity-minded admissions officers, I think you kind of have to think about this carefully, and here's what I mean. On the one hand, I strongly advise you to accept the rules of the game, accept the reality of what law school admissions officers are looking for, and so if they care, if they're trying to recruit people from a low socioeconomic status, and you're the first one in your family to go to college, don't be bashful about pointing that out. Point it out, reap the reward of it, take advantage of it. At the same time, though, one of the things that I recommend over and over again to people who work with me is that if you're trying to get into a top law school and you're trying to navigate a really competitive, high-stakes sort of admissions game, the reality is that it's a competitive process, and you're really going to have to change as a person and improve as a person and grow as a person. And one of the implications of that is that it's going to be really important for you to be part of a community and be part of a peer group that's really achievement-oriented, and that really has sort of a growth mentality and is really performing at the highest levels, because, as the cliche goes, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are, or you're the average of the, whatever 10 people around you. And so, if you're from an underrepresented group, I would urge you to be careful about really making that, internalizing that identity and allowing it to define yourself, and really surrounding yourself with other people in that group. Not because there's anything wrong with it per se, but you just have to think about, do you want to really be part of that culture, community, etc.? Is it serving your interests? Is it making you a more competitive, interesting, dynamic, high-achieving person? And I would just sort of think about that. So the bottom line here is, if your interests, your backgrounds don't pertain to this diversity issue, no need to weigh into it proactively. If you have intellectual interests that are tied or do comment on diversity and this whole diversity issue, that's going to be of interest to law school admissions officers, so be strategic with how you navigate this. And then the third point is to really think about your own background. If you do come from a community that's underrepresented and that the law schools want, certainly take advantage of that, but at the same time, don't allow it really to define you in a way that's going to undermine your broader competitiveness, your broader intellect and your overall sort of mindset and mentality that's really going to lead you to high performance and competitiveness.